have to cry no more. And we won't have to cry no more.
Well, apparently my PSA levels are amazing, so
Your PSA.
that's
That's
the
in
marker.
everywhere.
Pissing all over the place. That's the marker they use for prostate. Like
Oh, you've been doing your Kegels?
No, it's like a hormone marker or something.
I was making inappropriate jokes, mate. We're rolling. So today we're talking
I'm
about...
athlete B now. Like, don't use any of that. Start again. Don't belittle that shit.
include that. Definitely can't.
What's up, guys? We are back on the couch. We're talking about how to prepare for competition this week. So, again, all of us three compete, and we do it as regularly as we can. Obviously, we have to work around life and other responsibilities, but we try to get on the mat to compete as much as we possibly can. And because we do that, we try to take as structured and as intelligent approach as we possibly can. So we're going to be having a bit of a chat about how we get the most out of competing and performing ourselves, and how we help our students get the most out of their competing, keeping in mind that you've got different levels of it, different levels of competition, and different levels of engagement in training. So you've got some people who are actually full-time jiu-jitsu, want to be a world champion, and then you've got guys who are recreational and train 2-3 times a week and maybe have a family and full-time jobs and all the other stuff. So we're going to be hopefully giving you guys some of the secrets to our success. Link, you're on the left.
Always cop it first.
It's always coming. But
I think it's important to note, not only do we compete ourselves, but we take large numbers of competitors to
We do.
competitions.
Yeah, we do.
Whether that be from kids through to adults. I've taken 28 kids to one comp before. So we spend a lot of time working with other people at their ability, their level, and their aspirations to help them prepare for comp, which would be slightly different to how we might do it. So where exactly do you want me to start?
Well, maybe let's think about it from the perspective of the most common kind of student that's getting on the mat, who's competing, and they're not at that point where they want to win a world championship yet, because there's probably going to be more of those guys than the Ivans and the Anguses and the Adeles, and then we can kind of work up the ladder a little bit from there, I guess.
Yeah. So let's, like, your first few basic. Hey, coach, I'd like to compete.
Yeah. That's actually a really good one because you get that a lot. Usually somewhere around one stripe.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 stripes. Hey, coach, I'd like to do a comp, but I don't really know where to start or what to do.
Can I ask you a question that goes before that then?
Yeah, I was about to get to it, but go ask it.
Should I compete?
Well, no. Like, is it too early to compete? Like, you get guys who start, they've been training for 2 weeks, and they go, "Is it too soon for me to compete?" Should I wait?
So I think that's. I was going to get to that, but it's a really good point that you raise. I think as a coach, so now I'm going to talk from a coach's hat, but it still works. The student should understand this. It's very important how you approach your first comp, because it can be a very positive experience, or it can be a very negative experience that turns people away from jiu-jitsu for good. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to compete," or "I want to do X comp," I look at the individual. Where are they at? Usually want to see at least 1 stripe in the belt before they compete, because then at least I know they've been through our introductory syllabus and they have a basic idea of everywhere, and they've done, a minimum of 50 lessons, so 50 by 5 is, they've done 250 rounds of rolling. So, or maybe not that much because my 0 stripes generally roll like 3 rounds, but but you get the picture. So I look at where they're at. If they have a previous background in some sort of martial art or similar or very athletic sporting endeavor, example, rugby player.
Yeah, rugby.
Then I might let them go with 0 stripes. But generally I'll tell them not before 1 stripe. Okay.
Yep. Probably a pretty good line.
So that same with the kids. Definitely with the kids, 100%. Because
Kids are particularly important to protect
1
the
stripe
experience.
or
1 stripe minimum. That's
Yeah,
when
I was
I'll
gonna say
consider
that's-
it.
yeah.
That's when I'll consider it. Yeah, because kids are also often slower learners. Yeah, so 1 stripe in a kid is like a quarter of a stripe in an adult. But the other thing I look at is the comp as well.
Yeah.
That's really important. So
This probably is even more important.
yeah, so if it's like, so someone comes to me and say they're a 1 striper and I want to compete. They say, hey, coach, I want to compete. There's a dominance round robin coming up. I'll say, great, let's do this, okay? And I'll explain steps in a second. But if they come up to me and they say, one stripe, I want to do pan packs. And you look at the way they're rolling, you'll say, look, maybe this is not the ideal competition to start with, right? Now, on that, I say that to everyone. So when I always lead from the front, I gym my guys up, I say, I'm doing this comp, let's go. Or there's a comp coming up, let's go. We're entering a team, we'll do it together. But when it comes to pan packs or nationals, I tell them really bluntly, if you are not going to train for this, if you are not going to join us for a training camp, don't enter. Yeah, don't go in half-assed. Don't leave your comp training until the week before, and take 3 weeks before that off, because no one is going to the Pan Packs or the Nationals or the Worlds to mess around. To what my dad say piss around the fountain.
Yep.
Whatever that means. Okay, so no one, everyone's going serious, and that's to protect them, because I don't want them to go in there when they may have enormous potential, but they haven't done themselves the justice, done that potential the justice in the training room, have a bad experience and think they either suck or jiu-jitsu sucks or competing sucks.
Yep.
Okay, because none of them is true. It's just the wrong place, wrong time, yeah? When I was in grade 4, we had this teacher that used to make us write lines, and it always stuck to me. And every time you'd mess up, which was quite a lot for me, you'd have to write 20 lines there. And the line was, there's a time and place for everything. Mm-hmm. And I always keep that in my mind. There's a time and place for everything, which means conversely, yeah? There's often the wrong time and the wrong place. It doesn't mean the place is wrong. It doesn't mean Pan Packs is wrong. Maybe next year. Or you're going on holiday, you come back 1 week before the Pan Packs, maybe don't do it. Yeah, it's fine. It's no big deal. It comes around not this year. It comes around most years. All right, so that aside, and I'll let other people speak in a minute. So they come to me and they say, I want to compete. And I say, okay, cool, this comp's good. They say, what do I do? And the first thing I say is, where are you comfortable? Let's have a look at your role. And what I want to do is I want to identify their natural leaning, and I want to extrapolate that. So I want to build them an A game off the direction they naturally go. So if they're lanky, I'm not going to say, let's build you a double leg over under pass game. Of course not. That's not their natural style. But if they're a little tank and they like to be on top, then maybe that's what we're after. If they're lanky, they're probably playing guard. So all right, let's work on a good guard pull. Let's work on attacks from there. And I always make them start by drilling A game. So I get the competitors together, because I don't have a comp class, so we do the comp training in the class. We identify the A game, and then we break it down. Okay, so identify your A standing moves, so how you get to kind of your first score. Let's drill that. Yeah, it doesn't even have to be first score. If it's guard pull, it can just be, let's get your grips, get to the guard, we'll drill that. Okay, now our partner will drill it with 20% resistance, then 30% resistance, etc. Okay, now we have that. All right, what sub are you going to use from here? Let's do that. And so I build, this is for the total beginner, yeah? I build them some confidence by the fact that they know, or they have a plan when they go in. It doesn't mean it's going to go to plan, but to walk on the mat, tap hands, mum fins to your first comp and go, shit, what do I do?
Yeah.
Kills you. Unless you're, there's that 0.1% who are just natural competitors and they'll do whatever.
Yeah.
But I want them to at least know steps 1, 2, and 3. And then from there, they'll start to feel more comfortable, because they've been in a bunch of roles before, and when shit doesn't go right, they'll have some feel. That's kind of where, off the top of my head, hopefully I didn't miss anything, that's kind of where I start with beginners. I find it's a really good learning process for them, because they start to identify the areas they're strongest at, so they can start to improve that. And then weak areas start to come up as well. But for the very beginners, I don't work too much on the weaknesses, because there's too many. Yeah, and you don't... I don't believe that competition's won on defense. I believe it is in football. I don't believe it is in jiu-jitsu.
I don't know anything about football, so I'll take your word for it.
I believe competition's won on offense, not on defense, and I believe that a good offense includes defense in it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But
So
the vast majority of the competitions we're talking about, 100%. There might be some exceptions if you're doing some EBI rules. Where you can just,
something where you have to work for some specialty.
yeah, and then you've got overtimes and all that shit.
Now, training, just before I go on, how I train the more experienced guys is slightly different to that. It has that component, but then 4 or 5 other components. But
I was going to say that's a good base for
further down
anyone.
the track, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good rule of thumb. So, like you're saying, that the the brand new guys are like, I want to compete, coach, I want to compete. Awesome. But making sure that they've got at least a broad strokes understanding of when I'm on top of mount this, when I'm under mount this. If they don't know that, there's a chance, a decent chance, they're going to find a position that they get stuck in and they're just looking at you like, what should I do? Now, sometimes we can coach them through that situation because some people are super coachable. But the reality is if you train them regularly, that first stripe doesn't take too long. But we have those round robin comps here to give people an easy in into competing, chill environment, good vibes. You know, especially what we were talking about before with kids, protecting that first experience for them, so making sure that they compete in a space that feels good, because it's super overwhelming going into a big stadium. The barriers are between, you know, you and your parents or your coaches or whatever. It's super nerve-wracking.
Ironically, as an adult, I find that much easier than a little comp. But that's another story altogether.
Yeah, and I think it changes. I agree with that as you get more and more experience because all these other
Maybe
things that
feel
are
like
happening.
even though there are more eyes, there's less eyes.
100%. You're just one of 7 mats rather than one
mass.
person with 70 people watching.
There's that, but I also think all the other elements around it that are pretty nerve-wracking when you don't have experience actually start to lean, like you start to take advantage of them because they're things that you can manage, right? So I can get a little advantage by having a better warm-up, by preparing better, by getting my head like the way, like all that stuff is stuff that you can use. It can either go against you or for you, depending on how well you're prepared. And when you're super experienced, like we're talking about the other week about, you know, understanding how the room has its own nerves as well. You walk in, there's so many people shitting their pants. You can get caught up in that really easily. And like understanding that's happening, pull yourself out of it, you know, using it to your advantage, all that shit. But for kids, I think it's super important. For beginners, it's really important. As we move up through the ranks, I think that the idea of just, especially if someone wants to do a lot with their competition, getting reps out, getting in and doing more, as many comps as you can possibly get your hands on, I think is important. Having the experience of doing comps when you don't actually feel great, I think is important too, because if your goal is to win the Worlds, you can't guarantee that you're going to feel awesome that day.
Or you're not going to get injured in the first round. You have to fight injured in the second round, or you might.
Yep.
You know, for us, you're flying. I mean, fuck.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, excuse the language, when we get to Vegas, like the first 5 days, I'm a zombie. I got altitude, 40 plus degree heat,
It's terrible.
Jet lag as well.
jet lag, and then you're the foreigner in the room, and everyone
Yep.
wants to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, I mean, one of the reasons why whenever we go overseas, we always get there X amount of days early to kind of train that out of your system. But we've all had experiences of overtraining, and by the time the comp rolls around, you're like, oh, fuck this. Your body's just like, I'm not doing this. I'm not keen on it anymore.
There is actually one other thing I forgot that I do with the beginners, which I do with everyone. And I think it's important for beginners, but it needs to be like, so say if the comp's 4 weeks away, it won't be till like the last week of the comp. And that is I put a little bit of competition and pressure into the training room.
Yep.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'll do simple things. Like, for example, if it's the round robin, every session, Monday through to Saturday, we'll finish 10 minutes early and we'll put the competitors out.
Yep.
The whole gym will watch them. I'll make everyone cheer first to score because that's how the competition finishes. You also get to see a little bit of how that person's going to react.
I think that's common across all like the three gyms when we're preparing guys, because we understand the comps coming up, the structure, all that sort of stuff. If the first time you've experienced the competition format is when you actually step out to compete, you're at a big disadvantage.
Yeah.
Because what people think it's going to be and what it is, it's always different. It's always different.
A massive part of that is how much, in general, jiu-jitsu schools spend on their stand-up.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you walk into a competition and you're like, hang on a second, you're on your feet. What am I meant to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's got to be built in.
It's one of the reasons why we have structure around that side of things. We have structured training around guard entries and takedowns and counter and all that sort of stuff. But it is really important that in that lead up we have those moments. One of the things that I've realized when we do that is guys who have even been training for a while, as soon as you go, all right, we split the mat in two, someone's going to referee, so you've got two pairs, the nerves and the anxiety, even though it's just in the training room, man.
It's probably worse because you don't, like at a comp, if you lose to someone you don't know, you're like, okay, this guy was better than me. I think the ultimate way to put pressure on someone is like grab a purple belt and give him a really good blue belt in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Because he's like, man, I can't let this guy beat me.
Yeah.
Like technically I'm above him in the gym.
Yeah.
And even though we know that, like a good blue belt and an average purple belt is just probably the same thing, you know what I mean? But
And there's also the way that games combine too.
Yeah,
So you
there's
might,
heaps to
the
it,
purple belt overall might be better, But you get this one blue belt whose game is just the kryptonite for this other, you know?
Yeah, and they've got they're a little bit G'd up because they've
Yeah.
got to go at them in front
Yeah,
of everyone
and they
else.
just-
And that makes a big difference too, man. Like you got a 20-something-year-old blue belt who's just a wrecking ball and he wants to just like claim some scalps, and then you've got the 30-something-year-old purple belt. He's not going to be competing, but he's just there to be, help these guys. And he's like, "Fuck, man, I have to deal with this tornado." Yeah.
That's you dropped a really good point in there that we should expand on as well, and that maybe the purple belt is better overall, but the blue belt has a particular game that can beat this purple belt.
Yep.
And that's the reason why I get people to identify and build on their A game.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to be better than someone to win. And
Yep.
I'm sure that I've beaten people that I'm not better than. And I know I've been beaten by people that I definitely know more jiu-jitsu than they know.
Yeah.
But if your A game is very strong and you're able to direct the match towards your A game before he's able to direct it towards his, you have a very high chance of winning. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to identify that A game. If you don't, otherwise it's just like fish in a barrel. Otherwise, like it's luck. We don't want luck.
Yeah.
What do the Navy SEALs say? If you're in a fair fight, then you weren't prepared.
Yep.
You want to be prepared. Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes back to as well what we're talking about earlier, that if we're talking about beginners, because once you get to a color belt stage, then you should have all your fundamentals done. You are going to, if you're training with us, you're going to, because of the structure that we have. It's not necessarily true of everywhere, because if the curriculum's not built the right way, then and someone's good at playing half guard, then that's all they do. But your fundamentals are dialed in. So you got to get someone to the point where you're like, all right, we know that they understand what mount is and what they should be trying to do on top and bottom. That idea for all the positions. Hopefully we've identified their A game already. If not, we're going to identify it through the training process that's leading up to the competition. If they've said, hey, coach, I want to do it. Yep, sweet. Let's look at how you're rolling. Then we give them the experience of actually some comp rounds in the gym. And it's going to be specific to the format that we're competing in. So if it's a round robin, then we've got our 5-minute rounds, our overtimes, sudden death, and we've got someone actually refereeing, so they get used to. It's surprising how many people, actually now that I say it, maybe it's not surprising, because the scoring system is really fucking nuanced.
It's simple. The meta scoring is simple, but there is some really nuanced bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So that's another important thing. Actually, I do it with the kids. Probably need to do it more with the adults. To be honest, is making sure they understand the scoring system.
Yeah.
At the minimum, understand what they need to do to progress in the score. They don't need to know all the nuance, but I mean, there's some really nuanced shit. Like, here's an example of the nuance, which I think it's a friend of mine, a Brazilian bloke, put up a question on his Instagram and asked whether this was 2 points an advantage or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so one guy passes the legs of the other guy, lands his side control, and the person underneath side control bridge and rolls him before the ref gives him the pass points. Most people got it wrong.
Yep.
That's 2 points. That's a sweep.
Yep. If he hasn't passed, yeah.
Because the ref hasn't signified it's no longer guard.
Yep.
But most people will get that wrong.
Well, that
I mean, it's so bloody well nuanced, and half the time refs will get that wrong.
and it's tricky too, right? Because you can actually be past the guard, but there's not the 3 seconds of consolidation.
Exactly.
So
So-
technically, it's not a sweep because he's not used his guard; he's used the bridge from side. But so you can understand why.
That's what I mean,
and
like
I
little
guarantee
things
you
like
different
that are-
different referees.
I
It's
had that
so
happen
hard.
to me in a comp where, I mean,
People are like, why you give me 2 points? This ref's useless, and I'm
Yeah.
being gringoed. But
understanding guards 360 degrees, etc. I'd pass. It was an open weight, so I think the guy was like 115, 120 odd.
Jesus.
And I'd get to his and him and Big Mick, actually, even though he was a belt lower, they always used to be in the finals together and have massive clashes. And I get to side back and be there for a little bit, and then he'd reach his arm out and pin my far leg so that I couldn't run away, and then do a cartwheel over top of me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Literally a cartwheel over top of me. And I'm like, I've tried
He's from
it.
the bottom doing a cartwheel over?
Correct.
Jeez.
And as a result, obviously end up on side control, and he'd get 2 points for a sweep. And I remember being there like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, because you're like, a sweep has to come from the guard, right?
How is that a sweep?
But
And then you're 2 points down under a skilled Yeti. fighting to get out of that. You get to the same position again. You're like, this isn't going to happen again. And then it happens again. and you're like,
6-0.
what the fuck? And then it happens again. And then by that stage, you're just like, you know what? Just have it. But yeah, those nuances, man. Like
Well-
I've been a terrible one for rules and entering. I usually just
And they change too.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like
I
the
usually
rules
just
change
enter
and make it
and
a
it's
little
done.
bit harder, you know, like a change recently where if you pass but your arm is still around the leg, that's a pass now.
Yeah.
Whereas it didn't used to be a pass.
No.
Like things like that change.
There's
And
a detailer in the half guard with pinning someone flat.
So it used to be, if you just flatten them, wasn't it?
Both shoulder
Shoulders?
blades on the floor, you get the advantage. And now you don't get the advantage until you get put back into a full guard.
But it has to be a crossface now. So
Yeah.
then it was a crossface, you get the advantage straight away. And now
Yeah.
it's, I believe this is correct. And now it's, because I asked a ref after a match, now it's if you crossface them, you get nothing. But if they put you back, then you get the advantage.
The logic is sound, though, because they don't want you to get the advantage and the pass.
Yeah, the logic
no,
is
that's
100%
fair.
sound. Yeah, it's just hard to keep up sometimes. With
It is, yeah.
So I think like two basic important points so far because you know I like basics.
Okay, Hodger.
Understanding your A game or having someone help you identify that, and then actually it sounds like something stupid to say, but actually understanding the rule set.
It's not stupid, though, because
So it's
most
not
people
at
don't.
all. So if your coach isn't doing that for you, where do you get that?
Man, there's a lot of resources online. Yeah, there's the rule.
There's a rule book, yeah.
Yeah, IBGF puts out their.
So do you
video
guys
rules.
constantly review the rule book or?
We stay
Usually
pretty
when we
up to
argue,
date.
usually when me and Dave have a roll, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that was an advantage.
won.
I passed. And he's like, you didn't pass. I'm like,
Yeah,
I passed.
we get that. We have this
Get the
argument all the
phone
time. I'm like, that wasn't fucking 3 seconds. Yeah, it was. Like, man, that was maybe 1.25 seconds. We have that argument all the time. But we've got a couple of high level
Feels
refs
like
in
three
the
to
gym
me.
too.
Yes, that helps heaps.
Heaps, right? But even then, like Zeebs is one of the most consistent referees at the big comps.
And she still doesn't know.
Well, no, she's really good, but we have discussions about rules all the time because there's
hard.
even the referees. It's really difficult for them to keep up with all the rules. Now, then we've got competitions that aren't following the IBJJF rules. Now that gets a little bit easier if you're talking about sub-only stuff. So like the
most of those seem easier.
yeah,
the
there's
rule
less
sets.
stuff to worry about, and then all you have to worry about really is what's illegal. Like what can I not try to do to them? But you don't have to worry about advantages and passes and all that sort of stuff until maybe you get into the overtime.
I think one of the important things that I try to stress with the guys and the girls about the points is that the points are set in a logical sequence, right?
Yeah.
So if you progress your position to a more dominant and more
Yeah.
dominant position,
Yeah.
you will accrue points.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nuances, and it's probably going to take you to purple belt to really remember all those nuances. So don't, like we'll deal with them when they come up, but I can't sit down and run through every nuance with someone.
but
Like it's not going to work.
Unless it's like a super tight match, you should be progressing like a
Yeah,
normal
100%.
role.
And there's things like there's important nuances that they need to know, like some of the major ones, like never accepting a sweep, because even if your butt touched the ground, they come up and it switches
get
back. Okay, you got an advantage.
Yeah.
Those ones, but the more like if you bridge and rolls me off the pass before the hand goes up, that kind of stuff, you can't just
The
cover every base.
earlier on in the journey, it's the lower the belt, the less relevant the nuances are to the outcome of the match.
Yeah.
And so, fortunately, it is that way. It's very rare that you're going to get a white belt who's taking advantage of a rule like something like what you were experiencing.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the skill to be able to do it. So the jiu-jitsu that's happening at the junior levels tends to be more broad strokes. So yeah, you need to know it later on. But if you're competing regularly, you'll pick it up without even trying as you move through. But yeah, you have to have your fundamentals. Like that's a no-brainer. You have to have an A game, and you should know the rules of the competition that you're going into because that can make a really big difference on the outcome.
I'll give you another example of being surprised by the rules because I'm stupid and I don't often look at them.
No, they're hard. You're definitely not stupid. You might look at it, but you're not.
Like, this is turned into take the piss out of us.
And that's different
like normal.
from
Yeah. Anyway, so I remember in one match getting really been on a guy's back for a long time, just missing the second hook, and I think I got an advantage for that. And then later on in the match, he was trying to pass my guard, and something I often use is just to go to my belly, come back to my knees, and then reclaim. and it took all of a second, but he got an advantage for it.
Yep.
Which was a surprise to me because there's, I never feel like it's a threat for a pass, but I understand it. I understand that he's severely changed the shape and nature of your guard.
But if you stepped back from it and looked at the fight and you went, who got closer to doing something? The hook for the back control would seem a lot more, like the almost back is much more dangerous than the turtle.
Yeah.
But they're worth the same thing on the scoreboard.
Yes, I get it.
I reckon we should move on from rules for a second.
Yeah,
Otherwise
we
but,
get caught in the
but
weeds
just
easy.
one nuance that relates to that and is important for people to understand. If you're on top, you need to stay on top because
Never volunteer
lower
bottom
ranks will
position.
get
Never.
frustrated and sit down, and it doesn't matter if the part that's hard for them to understand when they get 2 points scored against them for a sweep, they'll be like, he didn't sweep me, I sat back to my guard. But they need to understand that it's just the exchange of position. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
who initiated
just
it.
going from the bottom to the top is a sweep, and it doesn't matter if you say boo or you actually grab their shit and turn them over.
Yeah.
It's as long as it goes from bottom to top, and
It's for that reason I never teach white belts footlocks from the top. Never. Wait till you're good at passing, or you got some passing, and then I'll teach you footlocks from the top. And that's also to help their passing. But anyway, so just on the A game, once we get, with the new guys, but more so with the more advanced guys, the A game's important. But I don't want to give them the idea or give the listener the idea that we just drill what we're good at and static and think that that's going to work. So part of the A game is then getting their partner to resist at various levels so that they can feel what the common reactions to their A game are going to be and start to develop counters to those counters. Yeah. I call this active drilling. You can have whatever name you want for it. But that might be, so Murray's A game might be whatever it is. Give me an A game, Murray. Doesn't want to tell everyone. All right, let's say Murray's A game
Let's
is
say 50-50.
let's say Murray's A game is
not.
Let's say Murray's A game is pull the butterfly guard and ankle pick, right?
Yep.
So then might in a session I might get them to drill that for say 3 minutes,
Yeah.
4 minutes, and now I'll say to the partner, I'll say to Dave, I want you to resist Murray at like 30%,
Yep.
and I want you just to feel where these paths may be. And
my
then
30 or his 30.
That's important. Yeah, you got to say 30% of your partner's ability, because if you've got a Yeti, his 30% might be 100% of the other person.
And also, there's always people that are like, I'm so good that my 30% beats them.
Yeah.
You're not to win.
You
Your
talk
job
a
is
lot about that's the key.
Your job is not to win.
I pissed off percentages a couple of years ago after hearing you actually in a training session saying, this is when I want to work. I want resistance from you, but I need to win. And
You do.
I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand the resistance to give. And so,
But you can also still build it. So I tell them like 50%.
So you can increase the resistance, but I give people time limits. So I'll say like they need to win at least a few times in the first minute. And then I'll increase the time and say, all right, you're doing the same thing for 2 minutes now. If they don't win at least once in that 2 minutes, you're trying too hard. That type of thing.
And I think that's good for general training, not just comp training. But I just wanted to make the point that it's not just about drilling a static A game. So I think this brings us to the point that I find important for me and for my guys and girls. And it's something.
Guys, isn't that unisex these days?
Oh, I got no idea these days, mate.
Muzzle scared.
And it's
Don't talk about anything about that.
and it's something that you alluded to. Like if you've not experienced the intensity of competition until competition day, it's a shock.
Yep.
It's a real shock. And even for me, if I'm not participating in specified competition training once a week, when I go to compete, the first match is a real shock. So I think when people are preparing for competition, you must have a designated competition session. And in that competition session, and Dave could potentially talk how to structure it because he structures ours, you must enter with a competition mindset. So you must go hard. There's no way around it. You must go hard. Yeah, within reason. If you're with someone much smaller or less skilled, don't hurt them, right? But you must go hard. You must give away nothing. And you must keep in your mind the score at all times and understand where the score is at and what needs to be done to win the match. And that's how you start to develop the ability to compete with intensity because the intensity's there. Like the first time someone grabs you, the first match you ever have, and someone grabs you, you're like, oh man, this dude's trying to kill me.
Yeah. How do you break those grips?
Yeah, like it's not like training. You think you're rolling hard, but you're not.
Yeah.
And to be able to think your way through a match relevant to his game, your game, the scoreboard,
Yeah.
while you're in that intensity. And I always liken it to this. Like if you do striking arts, you do a lot of sparring, you start to get used to being hit. I'll put that in inverted brackets, right? Because it's not natural to be hit in the head, but you start to
Accept it as part of it.
build some tolerance to it, right? But then when you don't spar for like 3 months, you go back to your first sparring session, a couple of times you get hit, you're like, whoa. It's the same. If you don't do competition training and then you go to a comp, it's a real like shock to the system. And
Certain things are very perishable
Yeah.
in what we do, and that's familiarity and comfort with intensity. I can't speak to striking, but it has to be something that you're staying in contact with regularly. So like while we've touched on a little bit, we're talking about structure of competition training or this idea of having some intense training. So you need to have a hard hit out once a week is a pretty good rule of thumb.
I think once a week's great.
Now there's some gyms out there that they just train like absolute animals every day. Maybe you can do that if you're on the source and you're 20 years old, but especially as you start to get older.
I would just argue against that that style of training for anyone under black belt, because what happens when you train hard and you're trying to win is you're only training a game.
Yep.
And I've said this before, and this can get to rating comps, which we can come into and stuff, that if you're constantly training for competition, as in you're competing every weekend and you're training for every comp and you're training every session like it's a comp session, you're not going to play, explore, let yourself lose, grow, develop. You're just going to do the same hard shit over and over again.
Yeah.
So black belts maybe.
Maybe,
Brown
but even
belts,
then,
maybe?
even then, I think it's
not for me anyway.
Yeah, I think it's there's a bunch of things going on. So what you're just talking about there, if you create a high stress environment, you've got frontal cortex, amygdala, and the smart party, like whatever.
I don't have that part.
High stress, the smart party brain shuts down, stress response, and essentially you can't develop new skills anymore. So you need to keep the room
That's
playful.
like me on a daily
relaxed.
basis.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so the
That's
room's
way
got to
put
be
it.
relaxed in order for the training to be seeking and playful, and that allows you to develop new skills. But if it's really intense all the time, you don't. You just default back to what you know. So you want to have a hard hit out once a week, but if you're having a hard hit out every day, you're not going to be developing new skills.
Yeah.
So you have your hard hit out, and that's going to expose some stuff, and then you take notes on that stuff, and then during the week, we want to try to figure those things out. And then we come back the next week, and we've hopefully added some layers and some nuance.
So the way I term that with, it's not from a competitive standpoint, but just training in general, is that I try to, and I suggest for my guys that they have, they structure A game days throughout the week, and then they structure creative days. And the creative days, they are deliberately like, they're meant to be aware enough that when they get to a certain position and they usually go left, they have to go right.
Yep.
Or if they usually go forward, they have to back out. If they take down, they have to pull guard. They just, anything different.
Or just have something different they're working on.
Yeah, just play something different.
Like I work a lot of passing these days, which comp training comes, I'm going to play guard.
Yeah, and it makes training way more enjoyable, and it also plays to the GOAT Marcelo's strategy of letting the person move so that you get used to reactions.
So this leads us to a conversation I was having with some of the students, which is, let's say you've got an awesome back control, and the vast majority of the time you get to back control, you can finish the match. You're having a roll with someone, you get to back, you put them away. You have same guy, roll, get to back, you put them away, roll, get to back. Man, I could put them away. I'm going to let them get out 10%. I'm going to let them escape just 10%. And then I'm going to deal with that, put them away. We have another roll, get to back. I'm going to let them get out 20%. So you're getting real reactions from your partner, but you're also training yourself to respond to each of those specific situations. Because if you do run into the guy in competition who can, whether it's just through intensity or maybe you're just a little bit slow on pulling the trigger or whatever it might be, gets out, you're familiar with each of those different stages.
You know what that is? That's active drilling.
Well,
Hang on. That's active drilling when the partner doesn't realize that that's what you're doing.
100%.
Exactly.
And this brings a really, I think, important point to competition training. You can't just have equal or higher opponents all the time. You
No, it's
need
be
people
mixed.
of lesser ability. Because this is where you can develop your attacking sequences. If I'm constantly getting smashed by Muzz, I never can develop my attacking sequences and learn how to win. I only learn how to defend.
Yeah.
And that's not going to help. And there's definitely a misnomer amongst white belts like, I just need to be in a room where everyone's a killer and I'll get better.
No, you'll get better at defending.
Yeah, you'll get better at losing. Good
Yeah.
job, champ.
Yeah.
But I don't mean that. Sorry, that was condescending. I take that back. They just don't know yet.
No, you don't. But and you make that assumption, right? If it's all black belts, I'm going to get awesome. So you're just going to be cannon fodder, man. You'll get better at defending slowly. You might get mentally tougher. Good chance you might quit.
So you need that equal. You need people that you're better
You need
than.
people you can beat.
Equal with to have the tough stouches and to put the new technique that you developed on the lesser training partners with, lesser skilled training partners. And then you need the people that give you a hide so you can develop your defense and
Yep.
intensity and resilience. Interestingly, just to illustrate the point, Hodger did most of his training with blue belts when he won his 10 world championships. Lepre won 1 world championship. Now he's won 7. He won 1 world championship, didn't win one for 6 years, till he moved to America, opened the academy, training white and blue belts, and won the rest of his world championships.
Yep. There's
100%. I mean, you don't like.
Do you know what I think that active? Okay, call it active drilling.
Call it whatever you
Call
want,
it whatever. But when you're rolling with someone that is giving you good reactions, but
Gotta
they're
be
just
decent.
they're just not good enough to beat your response, you
Yep.
get to learn the finesse
100%.
required to actually fulfill that response, and then you get to learn the connection and all that kind
Yep.
of stuff. And then
And then if you're like Dave's saying, if you're really above, then you give them a bit of string
yeah,
and let them go a bit further down the path.
This we could segue really easily into our conversation
shouldn't,
just
yeah.
about drilling, because there's people out there that think drilling's a waste of time, and it's absolute fucking horseshit.
Well, the
Drilling
best
is-
academies in the world all drill hard.
They all drill hard, but what we have to get really clear on is how to define drilling, and there's a bunch of different ways, and we'll talk about that another time. But when you're having, you don't want to be in a situation where you get out on the comp mat and then you get surprised by situations.
yeah,
Which is why we want to be so good at funneling the fight into our game.
yeah.
So Dave Meyer had a really who's one of the Dirty Dozen. He's competed just a gajillion times over the years, and he's been very, very, very successful. And one of the things that he said in one of the seminars that I went to of his when John Will brought him out early on, I think I was a blue belt at the time, was that he's like, if someone's got a good guard, he's like, I want to read about it in the newspaper. I don't want to know about it in the comp. He's like, I'm not going to let him get there. I think that's
a good way
really
of putting it, yeah, 100%.
really important. So one of the most important things that we're trying to achieve when we're competing is funneling the guy into our game. Whoever gets their partner first to the game that they want to play usually wins. So if Link's got a phenomenal footlock and he manages to drag me into that fight, I'm going to have a fucking hard time.
That's touching on. I mean, that's getting down the track in terms of competition, though, because I think that's. I mean, it's getting to the business end then when you're actually researching your, your opponents.
Well,
no, I don't think so. I think
not
this is
into
more
that.
about. I think because you can approach it 2 ways. You can wrestle to not be beat by them, or you can roll to win. And I think this is more about rolling to win. So how do I, from every situation that's going to be common,
You're just
to what I
talking
do-
about developing your.
Yeah. So
You're
if
right,
I
okay.
funnel them into my game,
Yeah.
then I'm not in his.
Okay,
And I
took
think,
that like you were.
I think
trying to,
the hard
avoid.
thing about, and it's another thing that beginners get caught up with, like trying, I've looked up my guys, blah, blah, blah. One, everyone looks 10 times better on Instagram, right? No one puts up them getting smashed on Instagram on the hard days or when they go home crying in the car because they feel like they should do jiu-jitsu. Right? No one has that. I've never had it, but no one has it. No one puts that on Instagram, right?
I've never been beat.
I just accept the shitness.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to cry over it. It's just there. And also, then, like Dave's saying, you're wrestling to them. You're not wrestling to you. Yeah. And finally, if you're entering like IBJJF, etc., there might be, man, at the Worlds in blue belt brackets have got triple figures, 100 kids.
Yep.
You can't.
And
You can't develop a plan for these guys. So you have to develop your skill where you can funnel any style of opponent's game into your game.
Yep.
That's my
And obviously,
theory.
so obviously the more
Super fight
important,
different.
Yeah,
Yep.
the more important competitions get, the more dialed in that needs to be. But I still like that's still kind of based on our first 2 points.
Yeah.
The A game.
Yep.
And whatever the second one was.
So
I'm phasing
here's
out.
another thing, and I think sorry.
I said whatever the second one was. I'm phasing out. I'm having a moment.
Have fundamentals, A game, know the rules.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the next thing I think, still on competition training, I think before you specify how you approach individual competitions, but on the concept of competition training, so you train your A game,
Yep.
train with intensity, accept
One
nothing.
hard hit out a week.
Yep.
One hit out a week, accept nothing,
Yeah.
understand the rules and where you are in the fight.
Yeah.
On
Match.
this accepting nothing thing, I want to make a quick point because this happens really commonly in comp training when you've got someone who's good or bigger with someone who's small or less experienced. The goal is not to protect your partner's emotions or ego or whatever it is when you're training. So if I'm training with someone who's a blue belt and 50 kilos, I'm going to submit them as many times as I can in however long that round is. That's my job.
In
when we're doing
competition training.
In comp training.
Not normal class.
Yeah, and
Necessarily.
they've got to be okay with that by stepping onto competition. But now I'm not going to be malicious, so I'm not going to submit them by knee right in their face. My technique, and what I'm always telling the guys in those situations is submit them as many times as you can using good jiu-jitsu.
It helps them.
Yeah, it's going to help them get better, and it's going to help you get better. And if it's like if there's a big skill difference, so sometimes I'll go, let's say you've got a brown belt who's 90 kilos and they're rolling with a blue belt who's 70 kilos. I'm like, and it's a 5-minute round. I'm like, you got to sub him 4 times. That's your goal. If you don't sub him 4 times, he'd beat you this round. Because there's a big disparity there. So you got to set the terms in a way that makes this other guy hustle. And then this other guy's got a goal. Like, all right, cool. I can get caught, but I just got to make sure I don't get caught 5
Yeah, he can
times.
have little wins within a general concept of losing.
Yeah.
That's really
You still got to protect your partners. And
yes.
the number one thing as well, like it's I've been guilty of this as well, is being stubborn in comp training. Like, I'm not going to tap.
Protect yourself too. Yeah.
So you can't be a fuckhead and injure yourself because I find that super frustrating as a coach. It's like, all right, now you got to sit out rounds and stick ice on your elbow. I
remember this
they know
moment.
exactly who I'm talking about.
Blue belts, mate.
Yeah, blue belts. But because now you've just because you
Stopped your training and
survived, so they
probably
didn't
the
tap,
comp.
got out.
Yeah.
But now you can't wrestle the rest of the rounds,
Yeah.
and maybe the next couple of days. Like, how does that help? Now, it frustrates the hell out of me. I have done the same thing. So we've got to be really careful about that. It's like you want to fight really hard and not give away anything for free. But when you get caught, don't be stubborn. Like just let them have it and then get straight back into it. I think that's the key. Is like there's a line, and I'd rather see guys tap early.
100%.
So you don't fight the subs, as in So you get guys who instead of trying to escape a sub, will just refuse to tap as long as they possibly can. You know what I mean? Like that's not where the stubbornness should be. The stubbornness should be in, I'm not going to let you pass my guard. I'm gonna shoulder wall like crazy. I'm gonna hand fight. I'm gonna do all the things. So the stubbornness needs to be active.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
But you got to protect your body because you want to be on the mat for the next roll. Like
100%.
So it's really important that when you're in that comp room, again, this is the kind of thing that only wants to happen once a week, because if you're doing it every day, you're gonna
It's too much load.
you're gonna burn out. You're not
Central
going to
nervous
enjoy
system
training.
gets
You're probably
fried.
not even going to want to compete by the time it comes around. Ideally, you should, and it's going to vary depending on each athlete, the intensity and how much they can handle. So, for example, if you've got a 50 kilo brown belt, but the room is mostly 70 kilo people of various ranks, that comp training is going to be a bigger load for them than it is for all the other people, just because of size.
100%.
So managing their stress so they stay, you want to keep your athletes and yourself at that point where you just want to do a little bit more all the time, but never quite
A
tip
little
over.
tiny bit left in the tank.
Exactly. Just a little bit. You want to be hungry all the time.
I think that's an important thing with intensity, not just in managing load, which also we can talk about in how to prepare fully for a comp, like a camp, but also managing intensity in your role, because I find, and I'm going to assume most people find the same. If I go like ham, my jiu-jitsu goes to shit.
Yep.
If I'm too relaxed, the opponent's intensity will overwhelm me.
You're an observer, yeah.
So there's this you're what do I call it? A spectator. I give them the lecture. You don't want to be the spectator in the stands, you want to be the player in the ground. So there's this level I find, and in my brain everyone has a different word. I call it like controlled aggression.
Yep.
That's what I call it in my head, where I'm aggressive but I'm still smooth and technical. And when I go either side of that, I roll like shit. So if you're trying to find that line, so when we say you got to roll with intensity, that doesn't just mean like you rip your gi open and you're like, whoa, let's go, and you just go spastic and forget jiu-jitsu.
No.
I think though, if you can convince your opponent to do that, then you're going to win. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
So another way I think of phrasing it, because aggression means different things to different people, and a lot of
Yeah,
people
it's just
think, like you're
mine.
saying, those go full ham and they end up gassing themselves out, or they're not doing good jiu-jitsu, or they get caught though in the flurry that they've created. I think one of the ways that works for me, and I try to communicate with the students, is it's about being active all the time.
Yeah.
If you are stopping, then you're missing something. You're giving them a chance to get back in the fight. And if we think of it in a chess game, if you let your partner take multiple moves for every one of yours, you could be significantly better and they can still beat you.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure that we're taking at least one move for every one of theirs, but ideally 2 moves for every one of theirs if we can. Now those moves might be big, they might be small. So one of the things that I find happens a lot, particularly when we get stressed and tired, is when our partner slows down, we're like, this is the point where I can take a rest. No. This is the point where I take some free moves. And we have to train that, because usually when we get stressed, one of the things that we try to do is slow the fight down and stop making decisions, because we've probably got some decision fatigue, and just like catch a moment physically and mentally as well. Like, all right, I'll go in a second. We've got to train ourselves to constantly be active all the time. Like, just do the next thing. And it might be a small thing.
Progress your position.
Exactly.
Even that can be like
Improve the grip.
improve the grip,
Move the shoulder
yeah.
forward. That those little tiny adjustments. That takes training. It takes training. Like,
It's very much a head game. I mean,
Yep.
Yeah.
and that, like, if you
Competing is,
aren't switched on to that yourself, then I mean, you're hoping that your coach is telling you to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And like, we're trying to make our athletes aware of that whenever we're actually in the gym, particularly if we're doing comp training. But
So actually, I think that brings brings to the other point I was going to say about comp training, and that is once you've worked through the A game, et cetera, an emphasis on positional sparring with role playing is important, because different things happen in matches that you need to be able to work through. I'll give you 2 examples. One is like when we start with, you let your partner pull. Then you have to work to pass. So he gets his grips, pulls, as soon as the bottom hits the ground, the match is on.
Yep.
Because sometimes if you're, like, I'm a guard puller, but sometimes they pull first.
Yeah.
The other really important one, which I think helps heaps, even though it's incredibly frustrating, is to do the old, there's 2 minutes left, he's up by an advantage, he's in the closed guard, and he's trying to stall. And you have to, because I get
Massively helpful.
Yeah.
an Achilles heel of mine, as you'll know, is the short, stocky guys who play on their knees can stall me out, and I end up losing these ugly matches that are like 2-2 and 2-2 one advantage to him, or 0-0 one advantage to him, and I spend a lot of time working on it. So working in that situation and learning how to deal with the stalling, because people are going to stall, and on converse, you're kind of training yourself to be able to stall if you need to. Okay, not that I said that out loud, but learning to deal with the stalling is important. And my philosophy on stalling is this: if someone stalls me out and I lose a match, it's not his fault. I don't blame him. Like, in the heat of the moment, I might be like, bloody stalled me out, staller.
Yeah.
But I could not stop him stalling me out. So whose fault's that?
If you think of
That's
stalling
my
as,
fault.
If you think of stalling as a technique and you just weren't good enough to beat it or counter
That's
it,
how I look
It
at
is
it.
a
Like,
technique,
I
and
need
you're
to
not
be
good enough to
it's-
beat it. If they've
exactly.
stalled you out, you're not good enough.
I don't blame someone for stalling
And
me.
if
I
they've
blame
done it within the
myself for not
rules
being
too.
able to deal to deal with it.
And that's why it's so frustrating, is that they've just killed the game, you know, and you haven't been able to.
You haven't been able to do anything
reignite
about
the
it.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what this all kind of attests to, is touching on, is teaching yourself to deal with stress, and I
Huge.
think, and the
We've touched on this before when we've talked about performance, the elements that we have with getting good at competing. So we've got your skill acquirement. That's technical stuff. Like, I have to get good at my triangle or whatever it is. And you've got your strategy. So the meta strategy, I'm like, all right, this is the game that I play. This is how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And that's going to be impacted by the rules. And then you've got performance, which is managing your head.
And something that, like, we've discussed, that it seems that everyone's pretty much on the same path in terms of doing it with their like at the relative clubs, in terms of creating an environment that is similar to what the competition is going to be like in terms of rounds and rule set and things like that. That's not enough. The most stressful situations that you can come across in those competitions, I think, is as the matches progress. Like, so actually telling yourself or telling your athletes or the people who are competing that this is now semi-final, or treat this one like the final.
Yep.
And situational examples like Link gave before about being 2 points behind or been pulled out of your A game because they actually pulled guard or they took you down or whatever it may be, and starting from those very real situations that are likely to happen.
Yep.
Rather than finding out what it's like on the day. So the general point is, the closer you can make your training, the more you can mimic the competition day, the better your performance will be on the day.
100%. And it's surprising how much doing like a mock comp round or rounds in the gym, especially if you've only got a couple of either one or two rounds going at the same time and the rest of the class is watching it, how closely that actually mimics the stress and the anxiety. Because if you have competed, which obviously we have, you know very clearly that it's really, really hard to understand what the adrenaline and the stress does to how you feel and your gas tank, and how you have a tendency to just just go crazy, freaky old man strength for a minute and then blow, like all that stuff. You can't know it until you actually experience it. And you can do all the conditioning training and all that sort of stuff in the world, but it doesn't matter how fit and strong you are. If you don't manage your stress well, you'll still find a way to blow your gas tank.
Yeah. And
so having those mock rounds, I think, is really important.
Super important. And I think like something that Big Dave used to do back in the original Swan Street days, when he was leading the class, and like something like the Pan Pacs or the VIX was coming up, there, I forget, it felt like it was more than once a week, but it'd be like an announcement made about this comp's coming up, we're going to do some more competition style training. And I seem to remember him doing some of those situational based things. Because going back to, and it happened at the hangar too, because going back to New Zealand, I remember coming back for the first nationals that I did here, I asked the coaches there to put me in those situations because I remember them being so helpful. And I think like I've definitely done better in competitions when I've had those sort of situational sparring lessons beforehand. But more so than anything else, physical prep, blah, blah, blah. If I've gone in there thinking that it'll be an interesting experiment to see how I do without doing mental prep, it's very far and few in between that I do well.
I could probably tell you the outcome to that experiment without needing to do the experiment.
Yeah. So for me, and I think this is the point I'm getting at is, we've talked about the pillars before, and more jiu-jitsu specific pillars you touched on before. The amount obviously that's individual, but the extent to which we both may need to work on the mental side of things, but the proportion to which one of us needs to work on it might be like excessive compared to the other.
Yep.
And for me, I'm definitely more cerebral like that. Like the other things, I need them because they make me feel confident that I've got gas and I've got strength and my technique's good and that kind of stuff. But that none of that actually matters unless I spend what feels to me to be a disproportionate amount of time and put a disproportionate amount of importance on headspace.
Because if your head's not there, then the rest of it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And if it takes you 10 hours a week of work to get your head right, that's just what you got to do.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found really beneficial, this is going back over 10 years ago. I started doing conditioning training. Going back over 10 years ago, started doing conditioning training, and because I started to realize I was getting scared in competitions, it probably was happening from a white belt stage, scared in competition matches of getting tired. And that was stopping me from opening up my game. Because like, what if I go for this thing and it doesn't work, and then I'm going to be tired, and then all that stuff. So, and I think that's something that a lot of people run into.
Yeah, for sure.
Sooner or later, it took me probably a good 10 years to get there. Maybe 8 years. I think it was probably around brown belt. Started doing some conditioning training. For those of you that are from Melbourne, Como Park. Joey used to come along Sunday mornings. So we'd run up and down, do hill sprints and all sorts of stuff. And whatever the rounds were that we're doing, so let's say it's brown belt. It was definitely brown belt because it was 8-minute rounds. So we go 8-minute rounds, 2-minute break, hill sprints up and down, up and down, up and down. Sometimes we'd take weights. Sometimes we'd mix it up all the time. So you never really got adjusted to it. And it was great. It made me fitter. But the thing that was the most valuable about that was that little voice that you get in your head when you're competing that's going, dude, you're tired, just have a little rest here. It never completely went away, but it got real quiet. And I didn't have to have that argument in my head in spots anymore about like, no, we're going to go, no, just rest. No, we're going to get like that back and forth in your own head.
And you can like where it would come at X feeling, you push it further.
Yeah, it gets
Because
further away.
The body has an inbuilt rev limiter. Like we all
Yeah.
have way more cardio than we think, and
You-
I still
yeah.
think you should build your cardio as well.
Yeah.
but most it's as much
mental training.
You know, and one thing
You know you're going to
always-
go again. So
Well, and it's the other thing as well is I knew that other guy wasn't doing it. So this is before anyone's doing conditioning training, or most people weren't. There's probably some guys like Big Mick and some other dudes that were doing it, but the vast majority of people were not. But I knew that's really, really likely that this other guy hadn't done that and was not comfortable being tired. So I'm like, I'm going to get tired because it's a comp, but I'm okay with it because I know he's not. So another example is I don't mind it being really fucking hot when we train. And it's not that it doesn't impact me. It doesn't impact me quite as much as the next guy. So I'm tired. He's more tired. I'll take that. That's good. That's good math for me. That works out. Yeah.
Just one thing I try to keep in my mind on. So essentially, talking endurance, right? Is where does the word endurance come from? Endurance. The word endurance doesn't come from fitness. The word endurance comes from to endure. Yeah, you build your endurance to endure, and it's both physical and mental. But it's as much mental as it is physical.
yeah,
So that's one of the things I try to keep, in my mind when I'm being a little bit soft on my endurance because I'm like, oh, this is hard. I think I'm supposed to endure this. Like this is what I'm building here.
so
I'm not just building aerobic capacity.
Yeah.
That's part of the
No.
puzzle. But it's
You hear this all the time with jiu-jitsu. It's about becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we're touching on. Is like if you find that your mental game needs work, it doesn't matter how much you need to put into it, how many minutes or hours a week to get you to the point where it works.
You've
Just
got
got
to
to do it.
work.
Just got to do it.
So maybe if we went because takeaways, that's why
Yep.
A game,
Yeah.
know the rules,
Yep.
develop an environment that mimics the competition environment, which
but
is
not
what-
too much.
But not too much. But that's like
Not
doing
too often, I
That's
should
doing
say.
that's doing the harder rounds. It's doing
Structured training.
structured training
stuff.
around specific ideas like they pull guard first, etc. That we talked about.
And it should be varied as well. You don't want your comp training to be the same every week.
No.
Because it needs to create some anxiety, for lack of a better phrase. So the
Yes.
comp guys should be coming in going, fuck, what do I have to deal with today? Because that's what you're going to get in competition as well.
Agreed. And then the fourth one is like do some mental work.
Yeah.
Or some headspace work.
I think-
I just touch on the being nervous a little bit. Something that Lockie actually said to me when I was talking to him about it is he said that he suggested that I visit more clubs because there's always a little bit of
100%.
nerves when
Yep.
you're walking onto that mat. And people
It's-
are looking for you.
Definitely, especially if you're of a higher rank.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forgot what I was going to say. I have another point, but it was to do with that. It's gone. Sorry.
So let's recap those points again. So we've got
A game.
so fundamentals really
Yeah.
important. So make sure you know all the basic positions. A game,
Rules.
know the rules.
Yeah.
And then your actual the structure of your training is really important.
And that the what I was getting at before when you went out just before Link was in terms of developing an environment that's similar to the
I was gonna say,
competition. That's more about teaching you to deal with stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teaching you to deal with the stress of the competition so that it's not something.
But also the situations that arise in a competition.
Exactly.
Because they're
So that
different to
they're-
rolling.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that they're not totally new stressful situations and a totally new feeling when you get there. You're like, okay, I've been there, I've done this.
I think
And then the last one was the headspace.
I think one thing you would say about that is you're not just when you're practicing competition, you're not just trying to win a roll. You're trying to win under the rule set, and they can be different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really different depending on the rule set and what the rule set determines is a win. Like if I roll with you and you almost sub me 5 times, but I pass your guard, we might think, oh, Muzz almost got me that many times. Really, Muzz had the better of that round. But if I'm in IBJJF, technically I won.
Yeah.
So you need to understand how to win under those rules.
Yeah.
And just on the mental, doing the mental work, one solace that people can have, because when they start, it might be really hard. It will get easier. Yeah, the more reps you do and the more comps you do, for most people, not everyone, you won't have to do as much mental work, but you'll always have to do it. You can't not do it. You'll have to do it consistently for the rest of your competitive career. But if you have to do 10 hours a week at the start, that doesn't mean when you're a black belt, you'll be doing 10 hours a week necessarily.
Do you want to? Do you want to touch on your structure?
Yeah, so that's what I was about to say. So I think maybe we should look at now. It's important to know how to approach. How do you train for a comp, but how to approach the various comps over the year?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of competitions, and it depends on your goals.
Yeah.
Whether you're a hobbyist or an avid competitor. And then how many comps you enter, or where those comps place in your list of priorities, how to train for them, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's
say
important.
something on that, which you pointed out as one of the things to discuss early on, which we haven't touched on, is the person's goal. Like you might be an Ivan, and the goal there is obvious. It's win.
World domination.
Yeah, you just world domination, exactly. And then for someone else, the win might be just that they performed well,
or even the win could be as small as they
Just
stepped
entered.
on the mat.
They just
Yeah, that
so-
can be massive for people.
So being clear on what a win is for you before you enter.
100%. Yeah, that's important.
And
And
then-
also being realistic, right?
Yes.
So if you're
So those
if you're a
might
one,
differ for the ABC.
yeah, if you're a one striper and your goal is to win the Pan Packs, okay, that can be your goal, but be realistic. If you don't win that gold medal, it's okay.
It also doesn't
you don't
start at-
suck. You didn't do necessarily anything wrong. Maybe you did, but quite often you didn't. You're just not at that level in your journey yet.
It's also that the Pan Packs is not the start of the journey. So it's like my goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My goals are Pan Packs, but I've got all these things that have to happen before that. And one of the first things would be round robin. Yeah, 100%. And it's okay. Again, if our goal is to win the Pan Packs, then these other comps, these like C and B kind of tiered comps, are actually about developing experience and exposing stuff. So if I lose in one of those, but it gives me some skills, and from that I learn a lesson, develop the skills, and then I can win the Pan Packs. That loss is that's worth it.
And I think when we talk about the Pan Packs, we should point out that the Pan Packs is not the elitist of elite level of competition. That's for certain. But understanding that most people who listen to this are Australia based,
that most
it's
Australians
the biggest
are gonna
thing domestically in Australia. Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing for like even just the concept of the A, B, and C. It's an interesting thing for me to think about. Not from a
Should I explain what that is first?
no.
Because
Okay.
we're talking about like everyone else knows, but
Sure. Well, you have explained it before, so hopefully they've been listening. But do it, and then I'll just say what I was going to say. Go nuts.
okay, and then I'll pass it over.
Sweet.
So the concept of A, B, and C is a ranking system I use with myself and my students, where we rank competitions based on importance, I guess you could say. And it's important that you do that because
Importance and the level of the competition.
level competition, yeah, and how it fits into your training, because it's important that you realize that you can't train for and approach every comp like it's a world championship, because it gets back to what we said earlier, where you won't be progressing in the gym because you'll only be doing your
If
A
you're doing
game.
a periodized camp and all that sort
And
of stuff.
if you
Yeah,
aren't, that also speaks to if you aren't preparing for the world championship like it is the world championship, then
Exactly,
then
but
you
I mean,
aren't
like if
preparing.
if every
then
week
you're just going on a holiday and you
Yeah,
happen to be doing a
exactly.
comp when you're there.
If I'm competing, that's whatever. That's fine if that's what people want to do. If I'm competing every weekend and I'm treating that like it's the biggest thing in the world, that means I'm training my ass off during the week. I'm only practicing my A game. I'm not learning, playing, evolving. Then I'm tapering for that, which is really hard to do, which then cuts into training time. Blah, 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 blah. So you need to look at where the
Or your
comp
Craig
fits.
Jones.
You need to look at where the comp fits into your overall plan for the year. And so if you're competing through a whole year, so say we take someone who's going to compete for the year, you need to identify the comps. And so the first level of comp is the C level, and that's your local comp. That's the round robin. I don't want to offend anyone, but it might be Grappling Industries, but for some people, Grappling Industries might be the A comp. But let's just say let's say Pan Packs is your goal.
Yep.
Let's use Pan Packs as a goal. Okay. So C comp will be the round robins, Grappling Industries. So for those comps, you don't train for them. You don't train for them. You don't do a camp for them. You don't taper for them. they are training. They are part of your training. So you train Monday through to Thursday. You might rest Friday anyway. And then you go to the comp on Saturday and you compete.
That doesn't mean you don't do your other work, like your.
No, that's right. You do your normal training
Yes.
plus your comp class.
Yeah. So if you're on a lifting program and wherever you're on the schedule, that just carries on.
Yep. So that basically is a training session, though it's a competition. It doesn't disrupt the rest of your regular training. Is that what you mean?
Let's another way of thinking about it is if you're doing your weekly, you got a hard hit out once a week, that competition just becomes that hard hit out.
Yeah, 100%. So you might not do the comp class, say the comp class is Friday, like ours. I won't do the comp class, but I'll go to the comp on Saturday, and that's essentially my comp
Same
class.
thing.
Cool. So then the next would be B level. Now, for me and my guys, B level might be Vix, Machado,
Yep.
aka The Gathering. We do Sydney, Queensland. So it might be
All the
that.
various state titles.
Yeah.
And
So for those are like in between. So I'll train for those, but only like a couple of weeks, and I'll taper a couple of days. And when I say I'll train, I'll still do the regular training sessions, and I'll still train at the regular intensity in those regular training sessions, but with a bit more of a competition mindset. As in, okay, there's a comp in 10 days. I'm going to roll. I'm not going to go spastic, but I'm going to keep track of the score. I'm not going to let myself get swept. I'm not going to accept positions, that kind of stuff. And then, I might taper like literally 2 days. Yeah. So I might start to back off on the Wednesday, and I might have Thursday, Friday off, or Friday off. And then I go do the comp, and then I'm back in the gym on Monday.
Yeah.
So those ones you take a bit more serious, and just because they're C or B doesn't mean you don't try to win, because then you wouldn't be doing yourself or your training justice. Yeah. Because you're trying to be a competitor. Competing requires you to try to win. And then you have your A comp. And now A comps, as an example for me, Pan Pacs and World Masters. Yeah. And those I have a structured.
Nationals?
No. Nationals is generally 3 days before I fly out for World Masters.
Yep.
So it's just part of my World Masters training camp. Yeah. I get the rest because I'm on the plane and all that shit. Those I have a structured camp. You should have a structured camp. How long it goes for is very individual. It definitely can't be too long because you burn out. So a rule of thumb for me would be 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the individual.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
And it has a much longer taper because you're trying to bring yourself to prime physical and mental condition on the day of the comp, which we can talk about in a sec. How I structure, do you want me to go into how I structure the camp, or we talk about that later? Do you want to do your point now? Or?
I'll say 2 quick things, and then you can structure it because I'm interested. Personally, like the week that we spent at Drysdale's beforehand was not a taper for me. It actually destroyed me, and I ended up tearing the TFC in my wrist as a result.
Yeah, too hard.
And that's because we're old as fuck. But also, and
Speak for yourself, mate.
and the sessions were 2 hours long, etc.
Well,
they were hard, mate. I don't think it's because we're old.
No,
They were hard.
they were amazingly
Can
hard.
I make a really
and
important point about this, though?
What?
Because a lot of people do this. They go, I'm going to go to, there's a big comp in the US, Pans or Worlds, Nugget Worlds, whatever it might be. I'm going to go to a gym 2 weeks early. I'm going to train like an animal for those 2 weeks directly before the comp. You're doing it wrong.
Way wrong.
The camp should be happening before you even step on the plane. It should be done. So if you were to go to the States and not train at all, you should still be fine.
Yeah, I get
The only
that.
thing that this is not you, I'm talking general, because so many people do this. They go to the States, they smash themselves for a week. I've done it as well. And then you're cooked.
Yeah.
I'll make
The
it
training at that end should just be about like getting a sweat out, clearing the jet lag out of your system, getting into the time zone. And a lot of the time, because you're going into a room where they don't know your game, you have a few rolls, because the guys that you train with all the time, they get used to wresting you. A lot of the time, it's a little bit of a confidence boost.
Yeah.
Unless
I
you go too
personally
hard.
felt like I'd had about 3 weeks off before because I got sick and a bit run down. And so showing up there, it was like, oh man, we're competing in about 6 or 7 days. I personally felt like I needed to touch and
To
taste.
switch?
Yeah, touch and
Sometimes
taste
you
that
got it,
again.
though.
And it just
Didn't work out.
It didn't work out that way.
I've had competitions on the Saturday, and on the Friday, I've trained hard.
Yeah.
And it's not because, like, you look at that and you go, well, logically, you should be resting on Friday night. But mentally, what I needed was to go hard on Friday.
Yeah, and I've done that too. The second thing I was going to say is it's an interesting thing thinking of the A, B, and C for me just as an idea, simply because when we were coming up through the ranks and competing,
There wasn't enough comps
there
for that.
was like just 2 or 3 comps.
Well, we had probably
And so-
3, the VIX, the Gathering, and and the Pampaks.
So they were all. You could run them all like A's.
Yeah,
So
which
my
like a MMA fighter would.
Yeah,
you know, have 3 A events a year.
default then like stuck in my head is like, well, it's this comp. Doesn't matter. It's you treat it like an A.
So,
you know?
Yeah,
But now you have to actually. It
You have
speaks
to.
to the
You
development of
can't.
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
you
you can't.
have
Otherwise
to
you'll burn yourself
structure it
out.
better. Talk about your structure.
if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Go.
Doesn't mean people agree with it. This is just what I'm playing with.
Yep.
But and taper, some of the taper
It's not
will
moving.
some of the taper will touch on the Drysdale situation,
Yes.
which let me say,
Shout out Robert Drysdale.
very good comp class. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you've got to understand how to use it to your advantage, not your disadvantage.
And it's good to know what you're walking into. You just flip the screen.
So the way I generally look at the camp for an A comp will be, 4 to 6 weeks. That includes the taper time. So that's like from the day you say, I'm training for comp, to the day you stand on the mat. I then will map out, I then look at what do I need? Yeah. What skill development do I need? So let's say how much of my A game do I need to practice? How much of the role play do I need to practice? You know, I'm stuck under side control. I need to get out, blah, blah, blah. And what holes have come up in training, whether it's in my A game or during the role play, that I want to spend some time on. And now sometimes you might pick 1 or 2 holes and spend the whole way through, but other times you might pick one hole you're going to work on for 2 weeks, another hole you're going to work on for 2 weeks. So then once I have that in play, I then structure the sessions and I use a spreadsheet and I color code them. So I put the sessions in that I'm going to train, and they're almost like there's usually no extra sessions. Like you're already doing these sessions. It's how you approach. Well, if you're me, you train twice a day. You're already doing these sessions. It's how you approach those sessions.
Yeah.
And so the green will be this is an easy session. So it might be technical training, positional sparring, drilling, etc. Maybe light rolling, smooth rolling. Then the yellow will be, and it can be whatever colors you want. More moderate session, okay, moderate intensity. So that might be lifting, conditioning, you know, or whatever. You can have whatever you want. And then red will be this is my go time session. Usually only be one of those, yeah. And then I'll map those out, and then I believe in this philosophy. And Murray, please jump in and correct me because this is your realm. I believe that the camp should go like this. Volume grows into intensity. So you start with a large amount of training sessions, but don't go ham at the start. Then keep that amount of training sessions and put in the intense ones. But then I think the taper, where a lot of people will go take the intensity out, I take the volume out, but keep the intensity in. So what that means to me is when I get to Drysdale, I want the hard rounds, but I don't want the 2-hour session.
No.
I want maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hard, stop,
And
rest.
you're not doing 2 a days, none of that.
Fuck no. Because the danger is you need the intensity for the comp to be sharp. And I'm not talking about 2 days before the comp. I'm saying 2 weeks, all right? So say when the taper starts, 2 weeks. You don't want to pull, I think you don't want to pull the intensity out 2 weeks out. You don't want to pull the intensity out of your training 2 weeks out from the comp, because then when you get to the comp, you'll be a little bit dull again.
Yep.
But you don't want to get hurt and you don't want to get burnt out. So something has to come out. So then it has to be the volume that comes out. So you might, I mean, we do it. We come to comp class, we'll be like, we're training, we're competing X time. I'm just doing every second round. I'm not doing every round today. And I'll do every second round hard, but I'll spend 6 minutes resting in between. Because I know if I do every round hard, I'll be cooked. But if I do every round half-assed, it's possible I enter the comp with that half-assed mindset. So it's a balancing act. Now, obviously, like 2 or 3 days out, the intensity has to come out as well, because you have to let your central nervous system rest and come up. But I think it's, for me at least, because I have overtraining syndrome for sure, in case anyone hasn't noticed. I haven't had rest day in like 16 days, by the way.
Humble brag.
I need to be disciplined. So I need to put it down on paper or screen, and I need to know what I'm supposed to do that session and try my hardest not to go overboard.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, the thing I want to try just off that is I want to try HRV and see how effective my tapering is. Because the only data is like RPE, like rate of perceived effort or how you're feeling. But it'd be nice to get some actual data. I don't know if it'll work.
So I'm gonna
Everyone's different on that though.
Yeah, I'm going to say one thing about that because I think it's very, very easy. Like we've given some really, really good structure, but there's going to be some people out there like, oh, man, HRVs and this and there's that. Like, fuck, I don't know how to. So we can keep it real simple. If you train 5 days a week, you have one session where you go hard, and the rest of the time you're trying to learn and play. That's it. Now you can start using heart rate monitors, and it's definitely a beneficial thing if that's your thing. But there's so much stuff that we can bring in that it can become overwhelming for some people.
Well,
Or you just don't have the resources.
Yeah.
So if you can't manage all of it, then just one hard hit out a week, playing your A game, where you don't give away anything for free unless you get caught tap early, and know the rules of the competition you're going into. If you just did that and nothing else, you're gonna be pretty good.
I think if you want to go to the next level though, you take that mentality into the regular session, but without going too crazy.
Yep.
So, someone like, I mean, Dave, since he's got back into competition, has done very well. And I seriously,
well.
hey,
He's managed his training well, that's for certain.
and manage your training well, but I seriously doubt that the amount of work that Link puts into it, you put into it.
No, not at all. I've never put a heart rate monitor on in my life.
No,
I don't actually have a heart
not
rate
only
monitor,
that,
Dave.
not
I'm not
only
saying
that.
I use that. I'm saying in the future I'd like to, just to see the
Yeah,
results.
sorry. I'm being a little bit facetious because we've got some of our guys that are doing their strength training, their heart rate monitors, and their coaches, and that's great. But I got really clear with myself personally about making sure that the process was still enjoyable, and I didn't want to turn it into quadratic equations and shit.
No,
So
what
just
I'm
on
getting
the-
at is his. Sorry, go.
2 seconds though, just on the some of the reasons I do the spreadsheet. One is because I recognise I overtrain.
Yeah, that's smart.
It's a
Two is-
management tool for you.
Two is Dave has an extra 10 years of competing
Yeah.
experience, but 3 is I use it for my top competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not enough just to tell them. So for accountability, I can't be there every round because I'm rolling 2. For accountability, they should know what they're doing on that day.
It's
in
awesome
their
because
camp.
you're giving them structure. But the thing is,
And I have to listen to their body though. If they get
Yeah.
cooked, and we have to adjust that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
and of course there's room for that in there.
what I'm trying to point to is how individual it is because
Very.
you have a lot of structure there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Dave's still analytical about this has been going wrong the last few weeks when I roll, or that session that happened, you guys kept on exposing this weak spot, and then he'll go and workshop it and plug that hole. But other than that, it's not, there's just the training session, working on his A game, and then hammering it out once a week. There's not that much structure.
Except
Am I right?
there is, but he just keeps track of it in his head.
Yeah. I mean, you're both kind of right. So I'm definitely not as structured as Link, but I think because I've been training for so long, I've got a fairly good idea of where I fail, and there's some mental things for me that come up. So there's certain things that when I'm coming up to a comp, I practice, and they don't take a lot of effort, but I'm pretty particular about when I step onto the mat in just normal training, doing a couple of little things that make a big difference. But yeah, it's not as structured formally, spreadsheets and all that sort of stuff. But I still do have a pretty clear idea. I'm like, all right, we're this many weeks out from a comp. It's actually time for me to start putting my head into that space.
Yeah. So the head's in the space, and you're actively working on things.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily Monday I'm doing these drills. Tuesday I'm doing these.
No,
drills.
but this gets back to the drilling point that we're making, right? So, on of course, there's guys in the gym that can challenge me, but most of the time when I'm rolling, most of my rolls are drills because I'm better than most of the guys I'm rolling with. Unless I'm rolling with we've got the top guys, right?
Yeah, so you can-
but they're not most of your rolls,
Yeah.
unless it's a Friday, in which case like we do the same thing. Like when we come in on the Friday and we see who's in the comp class, we go top 5 guys and we go that's the order that we're taking them, and then so we're having hard rolls. And I know if I'm not sharp and I catch one of those guys like Fu, Link, you, Max, Kieran, if I fuck up and they're on it that day, I'm getting caught. But most of the rolls that we have during the week, most of them, so let's say we do five rolls a day to make the math simple. So we've got 25 rolls because we're going to roll Saturday as well. Probably 20 of those are going to be the people that we can turn it into a drill. So I'm still very conscious about what I'm trying to work. And when I come up to competition time, I start biasing the way that I'm training. So whether the roll starts from the feet, certain things that are happening to be applicable directly to that.
Yeah.
I don't get anywhere near as involved in the strength side of things. Just to be like blatantly like just super honest about it, it bores the fuck out of me. So I do the bare minimum I need to stay together. I don't think I've ever lost a match because of a lack of conditioning. I can definitely say I've lost a match from being a weak-minded bitch.
Which you would get from conditioning.
No, but that's the thing, right? But that's what I was getting to before. It's like slogging up and down the hills.
It's more about this
so
than this.
I do certain stuff during the training process and picking certain roles. So I've said this before a bunch of times. If it's Friday and we're doing rounds and I look around the room and there's a little part of my brain that goes, not now, you're tired. I'm like, that's the guy I got to roll with. So really simple way of looking at it is I'm always moving towards, not away from. But I don't do that every day because I've done it too many times in the past and I've ended up getting injured because I'm not the biggest guy on the mat and I'm like, I've got to bash all the big guys to prove a point. And then sooner or later, even if I'm winning, my body goes, snap.
Yeah, I think I'll just touch briefly on the conditioning thing and then I wanted to touch on the taper if you guys are ready to touch on the taper.
Yep.
Conditioning to me, if you want to be a really high level competitor, I think is important. And there isn't a high level competitor that doesn't do it in some form.
Let me be
some
really
of
clear.
them
I'm
do
not
it in
saying
the
it shouldn't be
round.
done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done.
Some of them do it in the round, some of them do it outside. Like if you watch Marcelo has a YouTube thing on how he does his conditioning.
Yeah.
And he just essentially rolls like a maniac.
Yep.
That's his idea of conditioning. It's on YouTube. So everyone has a way they do it. Where I think like this stuff's important, one is building the mental resilience, which then gives you the confidence. Yeah. And two is sometimes like you don't have a choice. So if your technique's sharp, if your game's sharp, you don't need much conditioning, but you don't always get that choice.
Yep.
And sometimes like you're 5 matches in and the scores are level and there's a mad scramble.
Yep.
And you know what? You need gas to scramble. And no one wants to scramble. Like to me, scrambling is like anti-jiu-jitsu. Like jiu-jitsu is about control, or at least for me it is. So if I scramble, I have no control, right? I'm trying to then gain the control. But that doesn't mean I can avoid scrambling because sometimes it just happens.
Still got to get good at it.
So I feel like, and when I say conditioning, like you don't do a shitload. And for the new guys, I say your conditioning is you get your conditioning rolling. You don't need to be out running and shit. You need to be developing your skills and rolling in the gym. But once you get to a certain level, I think a little bit of conditioning helps.
Goes a long way, man.
Strength helps definitely. I think in terms of resilience.
Yeah,
I'm not very strong. I'm piss weak, but I get injured less when I'm strength training.
And I think that's the key thing. Like strength training is going to keep you on the mat more. It's going to keep you safer. But you can definitely get your conditioning through the way that you structure actual jiu-jitsu training, or you can get it by jumping on a bike or a rower, or again, this
or
is
combination of both. But this is Murray's. Murray's quiet because he actually has the answers and he's listening to us. Just kind of, just kind of like, there's a straw, there's a straw, there's a straw.
It's just all personal opinion so far.
It is, but it's also
What's the science then?
we've got to be really clear about something though, because what I'm doing personally is not what I would be doing if I was trying to win an adult black belt world championship.
Yeah, I get it.
Or what you did at purple belt, or
100%. And I got really, really clear with myself about coming back to competition.
Resilience.
Yeah. About making sure that the process remained enjoyable for me. That's my number one thing. I have to be enjoying it.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean to say that it's not miserable at times. So there's times when it's like...
It's type B fun.
Exactly. But there's part of me that actually really likes that. There's part of me that gets
all
off
do.
on it in some perverse way.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have made black belt.
Yeah.
There's no way.
But the
100%.
that's also one of the reasons why now at 41 years old, I still want to compete, is because it gives me a way to engage in that process that's stressful. But I make sure I keep it within a certain kind of set of parameters, because if it goes past a certain point, it's too hard on my body. I start to become a bit of a miserable prick. It doesn't make me a better person anymore. It doesn't make me a better coach. It doesn't. So it's got to make sure it's doing those things.
That comes back to one of the first points of
why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Which is kind of
knowing your goal.
Podcast but also we did a whole podcast on.
Yeah.
Which go back and listen if you haven't. What was it called? It was episode number 3, I think, or 4. Why we compete.
Yeah.
Why we compete.
Yeah. Knowing those things is really important, because it will help you get clear on, help you sort out some of the head stuff.
Yes, it will. I just know that we're all time constrained, so hit your taper.
Taper. All right, number
And
1.
then
We can
we're
all attest to
tapering
this, and you already kind of spoke about it. This is the simple guiding rule. Manage your intensity. Do not arrive at the comp cooked.
Yeah.
Because you will not fucking perform. Full stop. In fact, sometimes you'll perform so badly because you're so fatigued that you don't even want to be there and you're sick of this shit.
Yeah.
And you're flying halfway around the world and you're cooked. Do not
Done it.
do that. So manage your intensity. Don't comp class every day. Definitely do not take comp class mentality into the weights room. That's a perfect way to get injured. Twice, I know from experience. Don't do that. Okay.
You just imagine it too.
Oh, mate. Yeah. You don't go. You know
Go on
what?
the
When you
roof,
enter the
race to the
weights
roof.
room, don't think about the upcoming competition
No.
because you will not control yourself properly. I remember the very first time I trained at Drysdale's, Hernando Canuto was leading the class and he was speaking about, resting and getting ready for the comp. And one thing he said stuck to me, and everyone's going to be slightly different. And I know Dave's different. He likes to just move around a little bit the day before the comp. But one thing Hernando said that stuck to me that I like is he's like, when you have a couple of days, imagine a Brazilian accent, when you have a couple of days off training and you're like, I just can't wait to roll. He's like, you want to get to comp day like, I can't wait to go. You need to rest to get that feeling.
Yep.
If you're not rested, if you're fatigued, you won't be like, I can't wait. You'll
Yeah.
be like, man, I hope I don't have to have a hard one. I'm going to get tired. I feel so tired. You don't want that. You want to have at least one full day, or if you move around a little bit during that day, that's not really training. At least one full day, or maybe two. So you would taper the last week, reduce both. Again, so maybe the week before you reduce the volume but keep the intensity, and then the week of the comp you start to reduce the volume as well, to the point where you end up. For me, I like a day and a half to 2 days full rest.
Yep.
And then go. And then I feel more eager to compete.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's personal. Like, so
Definitely.
if that's what you
Yeah.
want, if that's what you need, then that's the way to do it. Maybe a good rule of thumb. You'd probably be better to speak to this. That maybe a good sign of overtraining is if you're really tired but you can't sleep, you're probably overcooked.
There's lots of signs. There's little, you guys would have experienced times where just like people you jam your thumb into the mat.
Your
Just
timing
just
is
stupid shit.
elbowing people in the head and stuff.
People are scratching you and you're like, I never get scratched. And then you've got little scratches all over you and it's just been a clunky spaz.
Yeah.
Timing's gone.
Yeah.
Because you're cooked, eh?
Motivation is like, I theoretically should feel like I'm excited about this session. It's just a chilled one. It's my creative one, whatever. And you're like, I don't want to be here. So motivation speaks, irritability, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it goes on. But
I think the sleeping
gotten-
one's a big one for me.
if it's gotten to the point where you're not sleeping well, you're pretty cooked.
Yep.
You need some rest.
There's a lot of pretty good shit in.
Probably too much. And I apologize if I
No, I think
said
it's good
so
because
many different things.
Because a lot of people are going to be at different levels, and if you're just starting out, get your fundamentals, get your A game, know the rules. That's really
Pick
important.
an appropriate competition.
Yeah, and then get some structure. If your gym or your coach is not structuring it, that's okay. You can actually build the structure in without necessarily your training partners knowing what's happening, because you can do a lot of that stuff. They don't need to know it's a comp round for you to be really diligent about. I'm not going to give up the sweep. I'm going to make sure I get the advantage here, or whatever it is that you
Just don't take the comp intensity to someone who doesn't want the comp intensity.
Yeah, don't beat the cheese out of you.
Yeah, you can have the mentality, like you're saying, but don't. One thing I hate is when people go, I'm preparing for a comp, so I grab this one stroke white belt and just whoop him.
Yeah.
He's not preparing for comp and he didn't walk into comp class.
No,
Conversely, if you walk into comp class, we're not carrying you.
that's
Like,
exactly it.
Unless you're small or lower skill.
we're gonna
obviously
keep
not
you
gonna
safe.
Yeah, we're going to keep you safe, but we're competing. This
Yeah.
is comp class.
But we're going to try to sub you as many times as we
Yeah.
can. So and then we've got the more kind of like detailed approach where we're building a lot of really, really clear structure. We're recognizing like the A, B, C level comps, what it is that we're actually trying to, what's the important one to win, and which ones are actually really just a training process for those bigger ones. Understanding the why of competing, I think, is really important too, because that will help you to really sort out your head. And that's a whole other thing, and we could spend a whole podcast on that alone. Because performance,
why
like
we
we're
did.
talking about competing, there's probably a bunch of people going, I don't want to compete. Like this is not relevant to me. It's like, well, actually it is, because all this stuff still happens when you're just trying to get better at jiu-jitsu in general.
Yeah, exactly. It's just hyperspacing the jiu-jitsu journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I just finish my portion with one thing?
Yep.
There's another saying that I like. I like sayings. I don't know why. My phone's filled with them. Don't fear losing, fear not trying.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up if you lose.
Mm-hmm.
Learn from it. It's an experience, yeah? Don't fear losing, fear not learning. Sorry, that's what it was supposed to be. Learn from it. You will get better. But don't be like the round robin at dominance is the most important thing in my life. And if I lose, I don't sleep for 2 days, which we've all probably done as white and blue belts.
Yeah.
Don't come to us and apologise unless you acted with poor sportsmanship. Don't come to us and apologise. I don't care that you lost. As long as you learn and you represented us with the ethics that we espouse. Don't beat yourself up over it. It's a competition. There can only be one winner.
Yep. Word to that.
Done.
All right, guys. See you next time.
And we won't have to cry.